Before we move on to the photo editing section, I wanted to address a lot of student concerns and questions about certain editing options being grayed out in the menu system. So there are a couple of ways to bring in photos as we just talked about, and I want to talk about smart objects. So smart objects are special layers that retain the original photo's characteristics. And what's great about this is it can scale higher resolutions up and down without blurring, as it remembers the original resolutions and pixels. So there's several ways you might open up photos, as we discussed. If we were to take a photo and bring it right into Photoshop and open it, you'll get a photo here. And you'll notice that the background layer is locked. That's easy. We can double click it and click on OK and unlock that layer. Now we have the ability to edit that photo. We can go up to Image, Adjustments, and we can do all of our different adjustments layer, which is what we're going to talk about in the next lesson. But a lot of students have had the concern that a couple of these are grayed out, and they're not able to really apply a lot of the effects and edit the photo or cut any kind of objects out. That's because they have smart objects on. And so I dragged the photo in and it opened up as a regular layer. If I were to open up a new document like we were doing in the previous lessons, and I can drag a photo in. If I drag a photo into a document that's already open, and I press enter, you'll notice it is called a smart object. See this little icon down here? That means we're going to go over this a couple more times in the course. It's a smart object, and so it retains everything about the photo. So I can make it really small, press enter, and I can make the photo really big again, and it retains that high resolution. It never really loses it. It doesn't pixelate. If I were to take the image that I just opened up directly as a new image, I just went like this and dragged it in. I didn't put it into an already existing document. Brought this into Photoshop. You'll notice it doesn't bring it in as a smart object. If I were to scale this really, really tiny, press enter, and I were to blow it back up again, you'll notice it didn't remember the pixels. It doesn't retain any of the original image's dimensions or characteristics. So it gets really blurry. So you can see why having smart objects on when you're not sure the final size of your photo is really nice. So if I go over here and I have this as a smart object thumbnail, you can always tell because of that little icon. I go to Image, and let's say I want to start to do some photo editing, which we're going to be talking about this. You'll notice a lot of these are grayed out. That's because some of these adjustments cannot be applied to smart object layers. So to fix this problem, and you're happy with the final size of this photo, you can always right-click any smart object layer, and you can rasterize the layer. And when you rasterize the layer, you remove the smart object abilities. But this means you can have a few more options that are not grayed out. So now you notice all of a sudden when I right-clicked and rasterized the layer and no longer made it a smart object, I can do more things to it. But smart objects have their place, especially when you want to scale up and down images. I felt like I just wanted to include this extra lesson to kind of go through that so you didn't get confused when I start doing photo editing and maybe you dragged your photo right into an already existing document and it made it a smart object. So let's say you want to make an image a smart object. So let's go ahead and practice. Let's right click, let's rasterize the layer. This is just a regular layer. Let's say I want to make it a smart object and for some reason the photo doesn't have that little icon, it's not a smart object. I want to right click and I want to be able to convert to smart object. So now it's a smart object. I'm free to make it small and I'm free to make it big, and it retains all that original pixel data and resolution data. So that's what smart objects are for. There's other things you can't do with smart objects, so anything that directly edits a pixel. So there are dodge and burn tools here. There's a couple other tools. There's painting, there's cloning. If you ever wanted to clone a smart object, if I went over to my clone tool, and don't worry, we're going to be going over this, you'll notice I have this little no sign, this little cannot do it, cannot perform operation sign. So I click, it says could not use the clone stamp because the area to clone has not been defined. So that is because it's a smart object and you can't like edit the little individual pixels directly with smart objects. And that's no problem because I can right click, rasterize. Now I have the ability to use the clone tool and I can take my sample and start to clone. And so if you ever run into any problems, it might be because you have smart layers on, and you can always right click and rasterize that layer, or you can convert it to a smart object if you want to be making resizing lots of photos and you don't want to get it to be pixelated. So right click, rasterize, and you can do a few of these things like the clone tool and a couple of the adjustment tools. But I prefer leaving an image in smart objects as long as you can because it's nice to be able to scale it without that pixelation. So hopefully that's not confusing. If it's confusing, don't worry. I can just ask me the question and hopefully I can clear up anything for you. We're going to be going over that again and again, like a lot of things here. So don't panic, don't stress out. This is a lot to take in. So I'll see you in the next lesson. We're going to start to do some photo editing.